Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Tee 'em Up podcast. I mean, at this point, I'm not even sure what number we're on. I've kind of lost track. But as always, joined here by my colleague, my co-host, Jared Huff. Jared, how's this week in NBA, man?
This week wasn't too bad for me. I feel like across the entire NBA, the league's pretty shaken up, but it's still so early. Aside from a blowout loss to the Warriors, my Chicago Bulls had a good week, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah, and it seems like with the way the Warriors are going, everybody's getting blown out by the Warriors, so nothing to worry about there. But speaking of shaking up, that kind of leads us into our first topic, and we kind of wanted to look a little bit, what's going on with James Harden, man. And James Harden has undoubtedly, he's been struggling to start this season. We've really come to expect these MVP type numbers from him, and for some, he blames some ongoing rule changes to learning to play alongside KD. So, Jared, I'm just kind of interested in what you're thinking. What's going on with Harden, man?
It's really hard to tell. I mean, obviously, Harden's getting up there in age. I believe he's 32 now. But with just his skill set and everything, I didn't think that this is a decline. I mean, obviously, he came into the season out of shape. The rule change has definitely affected his numbers in terms of points from the free throw line. He's getting there very few times. So basically, sometimes when you see him get fouled, he's like, finally, I'm getting a call. Like, he's like amazed. The Bulls played the Nets on Monday night. So it was one of my first chances to really pay attention to James Harden. Mm-hmm. And he almost seemed like disinterested at all times on offense. Whenever he'd get the ball on the perimeter, I wasn't worried at all about him. Like, I wasn't concerned, like, oh no, Harden has the ball at the 3-point line. He wasn't taking many shots. He ended the night with, I believe, 14 points, which is very subpar scoring night for James Harden. He felt like a non-factor the entire game, because I was more scared of LaMarcus Aldridge because he kept hitting mid-ranges like left and right. It was crazy, which great for LA. But I don't understand what's happening. I mean, obviously he had a big night the other night, but is that a sign of things to come, or are we just going to continue to see this shell of James Harden?
Yeah, and I think that's the question a lot of people are asking is this last game that he had, where I believe he was up there in the 30 points, kind of looked more like a traditional Harden. Is this what we're going to see moving forward, or is this going to end up being the anomaly game? And I mean, in my opinion, I think the league is officially kind of caught up to James Harden. He's far from the player that led the league in scoring 3 consecutive seasons, who at times looked absolutely unstoppable, especially behind the 3-point line. It was basically either he was going to come down and knock down a 3, or he's going to get 2 free shots from the line. And that's how they operated their offense over in Houston when he was really at his peak. And, he's currently averaging just under 20 points per game, which to me, it makes him a good player. He's a good NBA player right now in his current state. He's not, this average player to above average. No, he's a good NBA player, but it's just, he set the bar so high for himself, and what we've come to expect. And he was able to stretch that peak out to like 3 to 4 years, especially when he was at the top with Houston. Just, they couldn't get over, that the hill, and they couldn't get to the finals. And James Harden was, winning MVPs, but, it just feels like he's become more and more of a dependent player, not only dependent on the players around him, but also just dependent on the whistle. And now that we're starting to see these foul changes, not favor players like him as much, we're starting to see that dependency really shine through. And I think it's unfortunate to see, but, I just think he's become a good basketball player, and he's kind of come back to earth a little bit.
I just think when it comes to the Nets' chances for this upcoming offseason, Kevin Durant's keeping this team afloat, and he's pulling this team up the ladder in the Eastern Conference. They're at the 2nd seed right now at the time we're recording this. But if the Nets want a really good shot at the championship this year, a really good shot at the finals, they need James Harden to be James Harden.
No doubt.
He has to figure it out if this team is going to reach the potential that it needs, especially without Kyrie Irving and some questionable play so far from veterans like Blake Griffin.
Yeah, and KD knows that. KD's been around the league a long time, and he realizes that he can be, and he might at this point be the best we've ever seen him. And, in the past, people have said I've been critical of Kevin Durant just because I'm a big fan of LeBron James. But credit where credit's due. Kevin Durant has been absolutely amazing. I don't think anybody, when he came back in the end and during last season from his injury, we didn't really know what to expect from him. But he's come back, and he looks even a step better than he was before his injury. And, he knows that James Harden is going to have to kind of be what James Harden was. And they kind of brought him in to be this distributor, to be this point guard. And we're not really seeing that from James Harden. I know they really kind of hit their stride when Kyrie was like, listen, I'll be the two, James Harden's the one, because James Harden is supposedly the better passer, supposedly the one that's going to, able to have them bounce the ball around and find the open guys, find the big guys down low. But we haven't seen that with James Harden. I think to me, that's the most concerning thing is he's not distributing the ball that we've seen him. He's led the league in assists before. We know he can spread the ball around while keeping his scoring numbers up. But I think this team could be in trouble, even though they're playing well right now. I just think it almost has to do with we've seen kind of like LeBron early in the season really try to get the other guys going because he knows he can hit that go button. I think KD, in a sense, in the back of his head is kind of like, okay, I have my numbers. I'm playing well. I can get a bucket whenever I need to, but I need to get that guy going.
All right. So the past couple of weeks, there's been talks of obviously Ben Simmons getting moved. This Philly situation's still a mess, and it just seems to get crazier and crazier as time goes on. But one team that's been also struggling this season with some issues has also been dragged into a potential Ben Simmons swap. That's the Boston Celtics, one of Jace's favorite teams this season.
Shocker.
They're talking about a Jaylen Brown, Ben Simmons swap. What are your thoughts on that?
See, when we put this down as a segment, this was hard for me to go through because one, this will never happen. And the reason it will never happen is because the Boston Celtics are involved in a trade talk where they're acquiring a star. We hear this with every single player, with Anthony Davis, with Kawhi Leonard, with KD. There's always Boston Celtics. They find their way to put themselves in the rumor mill. They find themselves to, we have a chance. We have, the assets. We have these draft picks. We have young talent. Well, guess what? Your young talent's growing up. Your draft picks aren't hitting, and you still won't go get a star. So I don't want to hear this. It's just, and for me to say this is never going to happen, I'm not at all blaming the reporting because without a doubt, I think these conversations did happen. I think with the Boston Celtics, though, their big issue is they don't pull the trigger. They never do. They almost float these things out there in NBA and on NBA Twitter just to see people's reactions. And then as soon as someone's, like, oh, you want to trade for Ben Simmons or how can you get rid of Jaylen Brown? Just whatever Joe Schmo says that, they're like, oh, no, never mind. We didn't say that. And I think Brad Stevens even came out 2 days ago and reassured Jaylen Brown in private that Jaylen's not being traded. So it's exactly what I expect out of the Boston Celtics. This trade will never happen. And it's just, for me, it's another instance of the Boston Celtics think they're involved in every free agency and every trade. It's never going to happen.
The way I see things, I also agree this trade will never happen, but I should say it shouldn't happen. The Celtics obviously need to do something to change things up, and the Sixers definitely need to get rid of Ben Simmons. But for the Celtics' sake, though, they should avoid this trade at all. At this point, I think Jaylen Brown's a better player than Ben Simmons, and we've seen several points this season where Jaylen Brown can go off for 40 plus, like
no doubt,
tomorrow, to where I'll argue at times he's looked better than Jason Tatum this season. The trade, it just makes no sense to me at all because, I mean, Philly looks at Ben Simmons like he's a complete package and it would be like a one-on-one swap, or you got to give us Jaylen Brown and someone else.
Yeah.
No, it should be, if anything, if the Celtics really want Ben Simmons, it should be Ben Simmons and like Tyrese Maxey or somebody,
or Seth Curry or something like that
for Jaylen Brown. The Celtics definitely need to figure out something at point guard, and Ben Simmons might be a player in a perfect world that would plug in and fit well, but it's just not worth the risk for the Celtics. I think the Celtics can make another move, whether it is trading Jaylen Brown or pulling in more guys to put around Tatum and Brown, but this is not the way to do it. This is not the trade or the team to do it with, especially since they play in the same division. Like I'm not big on making deals with other teams are going to be battling for in the East, especially with the way the Celtics season is, where they still have a chance to climb back up into a playoff window. Obviously, it's very early, but I'm not making a trade with the Sixers.
No, I agree with you. On paper, this trade would be fantastic for Philadelphia. I mean, they'd add a perimeter-centric scorer around Joel Embiid. Could kind of help get him over that hump. Like you just mentioned, Jaylen Brown has looked fantastic this season, and at times looked better than Jason Tatum. But when you're looking at this just for Boston, to get them to finally pull the trigger, what does Boston gain? You know, what do they gain in
A
this trade?
headache.
Well, what do they gain? They gain a few more assists a game, a bunch less points, and a pissed off Ben Simmons who can't shoot a jump shot. They don't gain anything. And I think Daryl Morey knows what he has, but he also realizes that the market dictates what he's going to be able to get. Like, we thought when all this was first going down, maybe they could package a trade for, I think we even said at one time, a Damian Lillard type player. That's dropped. And then it dropped to, CJ McCollum type player. And now it dropped to, heck, we've even just heard they'd be happy to get Marvin Bagley from the Sacramento Kings, where it's like the market continues to drop. He continues to be a headache. They just don't get better from this. And I think Morey, from the way that Daryl Morey's looking at this, he's not pulling this trade with Boston without Jaylen Brown, because he realizes the Jaylen Brown stock is going up and he wants to be a part of that. Daryl Morey doesn't like to lose trades, man.
Definitely not. That man will he will not, like, he has to see when it comes to a trade that he wins. Whether he actually does or not, he has to believe that he's won.
Oh, of course. And that's kind of what makes him such a great general manager. And one of the few general managers that most people in the league probably know his name, is that he's willing to trade these stars, but he's got to feel like he's winning.
Yeah, I would say to some like casual sports fans, casual NBA fans, he's almost a household name in terms of just general managers.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And, I don't think this trade will ever happen. I know you're kind of on the same page there. I just think it's because it's the Boston Celtics, but also the fact that it doesn't make sense for the Boston Celtics. So we'll see where this ends up going. I don't think it ends up going anywhere. I think it's already been laid to bed. And now we kind of wait another week to week and a half for the next team to be tied to Ben Simmons and see kind of where that ends up. And we'll break that down when we get there. But now I kind of want to lead into one of the biggest surprises of the season, if not the biggest, has to be the Golden State Warriors and the start that they've had, man. I know a lot of people coming into the season thought that they would be pretty good. They'd be hanging around there in the Western Conference, definitely not a bottom feeder team, but they got the best record in the NBA at 11-1 so far. They've looked pretty impressive with every team that they've faced. So, Jared, what do you make of this team? And right now, should they be considered the title favorites?
I don't know what to make this team, honestly. I had them, I think, slotted as my 7th seed coming into the season. Because I'm like, okay, it's been a rough couple years, but I know what this team can do when Curry's healthy and playing, which that's been the case so far this season, is he holds that team up. He keeps them above water when they're treading. And I figured that it would be like a back and forth kind of deal until Klay Thompson comes back, because I think personally Klay Thompson's going to come back and he might not be the same completely defensively, but offensively, I don't think there should be any lapse from when he last touched the court. So I'm like, by the time Klay comes back, this team will be a contender in the West. And Klay's not playing. It's middle of November and they have one loss on the season. And I'm looking down this roster. I'm like, why is this happening? I get they have Steph Curry, who's playing out of his mind this season. I can't figure it out. Like, they don't have like a second guy that's like a surefire star, which you would think is what it takes to be the top seed with one loss in the West right now. But they just have a bunch of role players that are just balling out for them. Jordan Poole's playing really well. Andrew Wiggins isn't doing too bad. Draymond's just being Draymond, just stuffing the stat sheet night after night. Like, this is like the perfect best case scenario for the Warriors. Like, I don't think really anyone could have predicted this other than probably themselves. Yeah,
and doing this without James Wiseman so far too they expect him to be back pretty soon and contribute. But when I get into my take, I kind of want to be clear when I say this. I think the Warriors are a really good basketball team, but I also think that the league as a whole needs to pump the brakes just a little bit, not a lot. But when I start to look at this team and what has happened so far, they've played 12 basketball games. 9 of them have been played at Oracle Arena. They have had the easiest schedule to start the season. 9 home games out of your first 12. That's just, it almost seems like, you're playing 2K on easy mode is what it seems like so far a little bit. I mean, they've only left the state of California once for a basketball game, and they went to OKC. They've left the state once so far, and we're in, what are we, 7th and 8th into the season, something like that. So at the time that we're recording this here on Saturday, I know they're traveling to Charlotte to play Charlotte today. So I'm interested to see how that works out. I know Charlotte is terrible defensively, So it could end up being a blowout if Golden State just goes out there and continues to do what they're doing. But I'm interested to see if this kind of first real road trip that they've had to face, especially cross country, coming all the way over to the East Coast, I'm interested to see how these players will go. And like you said, it's been the role players. It's been Gary Payton II, who's like a 27-year-old rookie who's been in the G League for 5 years and it all of a sudden is making these highlight reel plays every night. It's been Jordan Poole. It's been who am I forgetting? Anyways, it's just been these guys where they know their job and they're coming off the bench and they're doing the job well. And I got to give credit to Steve Kerr defensively, easily the best team in the league so far. They are suffocating these guys that they're playing. I know they haven't really had a tough schedule. They played a lot of Sacramento's, a lot of OKC's, Memphis. You know, it's still kind of there on the fringe. So you can argue so far they've had 2 quality wins that you could argue, and that's opening night against the Lakers and then the game just the other night against the Bulls.
Yeah, during that game on Friday night against the Bulls, which I must say the Warriors were really lucky that Vooch wasn't there because
he did. He would have made a difference.
He would have probably caused problems for them just on a size aspect, and at the same time, hopefully he would have stemmed the bleeding a little bit from what was that second half because the Bulls kept up with them through the first 2 quarters, and it looked like it was going to be a much better game than what it turned out to be. And I got to give props to Gary Payton II. I've been following that guy for years. I'm always a big fan of having NBA legends' sons succeed in the NBA.
Yeah.
I love the whole second generation storyline. And I mean, I wouldn't even call Del Curry a legend. He was pretty well known from his era, but Curry became a superstar. We don't see too many legends' sons become a superstar. So I was kind of always hoping that Gary Payton II would pop. And he's really never stuck around the league, but I'm hoping this little trip with the Warriors, I'm hoping this lasts. I'm hoping he kind of cements himself as a player that you'll consistently see season after season. So it's been awesome seeing him play well. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when the Warriors start facing like the cream of the crop in the Western Conference at their own arenas. And I'm hoping that this run, because I know it's been debated for the last couple of years of how great of a coach Steve Kerr is. I think this run alone cements that Steve Kerr isn't a fluke. Yeah, he was gifted a great team. But if you think about it, the Warriors weren't really the Warriors when he took over for them in 2014. I mean, they were bounced out of the first round by the Clippers that season. So I'm just saying Steve Kerr is a good coach, and I'm happy for the former Chicago Bulls point guard to be leading, even though I'm not a big Warriors fan.
No, I agree. And Steve Kerr has really cemented himself up there as the cream of the crop as far as coaching. I mean, you could argue that Mark Jackson did a great job of putting together the roster, but they couldn't get over the hump. He came in and coached them to what they are now. I mean, you can make that argument both ways, but
I'll to 73 wins without KD.
Exactly. And I'm interested to see. I think they're a very good basketball team, and I'm not going to sit up here and say, it's just been a fluke and they're going to drop down. No, I think this is definitely sustainable. But also, I want to see a little bit higher level of difficulty, and I think we'll have a chance to see that over the next few weeks. And I think when we will probably come back to this topic here in a week or 2 weeks, could be telling a different story where maybe they've gone through some ups and downs, maybe some injuries, and coming out on the other end strong. So we'll see kind of where that ends up going in the next few weeks. But now I kind of want to lead into my team. Miami Heat had a pretty tough week. They had a tough road trip out west. Started with dropping a game in Denver on Monday. Then they ended up with back-to-back losses to the Lakers and the Clippers on Wednesday and Thursday. Luckily, last night against the Jazz, they were able to come out with the victory that they tried to let slip out of their hands there at the end. So ends up 1-3 on the week, struggling for a team that looked really tough in the Eastern Conference coming into this. But Jared, I'm just kind of wondering what you think, as a non-fan of the Miami Heat, what do you think after this tough week that they've had?
I'm not too concerned with this team. It was definitely a tough week. It was a week that started very fiery in Denver with everything that went on with Jokic and Markieff Morris,
and then still going on.
Still going on, yeah. The brothers created the Jokic brothers created Twitter, and they're beefing and feuding with the Morris twins.
It's going to be the next celebrity boxing match. We're going to see the Jokic brothers and the Morris brothers.
all I can say is I am definitely watching that next Clippers Nuggets game, and I definitely want to follow on to see if the NBA is gonna do anything to be like, okay, Marcus, like we're watching you,
Yeah.
because they're definitely gonna say something. And those brothers, the Morris twins, they're loyal, like extremely, like almost loyal to a fault,
Oh yeah.
because they've landed themselves in some hot water just before with stuff like that. Um, I'm not worried about this team. It's full of a bunch of veteran guys that have been through stuff like this before, and I think they're going to right the ship. And next week's going to be a completely different week.
Mm-hmm.
This Miami team, they're too good to let this like trip them up. Jimmy Butler, that man has a mind of steel. You think a 1 in 3 weeks going to break his confidence? No, it's only going to make him hungry. It's only going to make him want to win more. Him and Kyle Lowry are going to lead this team. They're going to right the ship. It's going to be back in the right direction. I'm not worried about this week for Miami at all.
Yeah, it was a rough week. And in that game against the Lakers, when they lost Jimmy Butler in the first quarter to injury, they fought that entire game, and you thought they're going to be able to come out with it. Ended up losing in overtime. So that's one that you look at and you're like, oh, well, we wish we would have had that game. But when you start to dig through it, you're like, hey, we hung tough without our best player. He's been playing MVP caliber so far this season, where you got to feel good about that. Obviously, the loss against the Clippers is one that you'd love to have back, where they kind of just went out. The Clippers looked really good off the bat. They never slowed them down defensively. They were missing some key guys, obviously due to injury with Butler. Also, Markieff Morris, who plays a key role as far as defensively off that second unit off the bench. So I think injuries played a role. And I love what you said there about Jimmy Butler. And I want to add on a little bit where Jimmy Butler is just, his mindset and how he approaches the game is tough as nails. And there's no doubt about that. I mean, we saw in a comparison, I can't remember what it might have been on Instagram or Twitter or something like that, where the difference between a guy like Ben Simmons and Jimmy Butler, where Ben Simmons wants out, so he returns to practice and mopes around before he gets kicked out, where Jimmy Butler goes out with the third strings and beats the starters in Minnesota Timberwolves practice. I mean, that's the difference that we're talking about. I mean, I fully agree with you. I think Kyle Lowry is kind of that perfect, almost 1A as far as leader to Jimmy Butler. They kind of have that same mindset where they're not going to, it's not like line up behind me or line up behind me. It's we are going to lead this team to where we think we need to go. We've seen Jimmy Butler take the Miami Heat to the finals where they lost to the Lakers. We obviously saw Kyle Lowry eventually win a championship with Toronto and Kawhi. They have veteran leadership. They know how to get a team to the promised land. I'm not as worried if another week comes where we're still dealing with a lot of these injuries. We're still not seeing Jimmy Butler come back, and we're seeing some drop in some games that we should win. Then I'll be more concerned. But I agree with you. I agree with you right now with what we're looking at with Miami.
So not only did Miami have a rough week, but it could be a rough go of things to come potentially for not only just the Heat, but my Chicago Bulls too. It's kind of ironic how both our teams are kind of stuck in this mess right now. But
oh boy,
apparently those tampering punishments that the NBA has been looking into for Chicago and Miami dealing with the sign and trades for Lonzo Ball and Kyle Lowry has reached its advanced stages, according to Adrian Wojnarowski from ESPN. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, when I started digging into this, I first wanted to look up, and I saw that ESPN reported that in the NBA added increased punishment. I believe it was in 2019 for tampering that is found. If the fullest severity, if found, the type of punishments that they can enforce on these teams, and it said a maximum fine of $10 million, suspension of team executives, forfeiting draft picks, and even the possible voiding of contracts is all a possibility as far as in the collective bargaining agreement that these teams could face. I don't think we're anywhere. We're not going to see any voided contracts. It's not going to be like Lonzo Ball.
That window closed.
Yeah, it's not like Lonzo Ball and Kyle Lowry just going to be out there in the free agency market, which is without a team. It's not going to happen. But, tampering is tricky, man, because, there's so many things that just kind of takes place nowadays that it's almost on the fringe of what the NBA would consider to be tampering. Many of these players, they're friends and, they're on separate teams that communicate. They grew up together. They played on AAU ball together. They're former teammates. There's so much movement in the league that friends it happens. And tampering, it's tough to put a stop to it when they're talking about just communication. Where I get it, what the NBA wants to do. They're trying to draw a hard line in the sand and say, like, keep everything on a level playing field. Nothing can happen before this time and this date. And that's a hard thing to kind of enforce. And I hope the NBA doesn't use this to try to set an example and go too far with the punishments.
Yeah. From what I remember when this first started is I think free agency opened at like whatever day it was at whatever time. Let's just say it was like noon. And all of a sudden, like within 2 minutes on my phone, the very first notification was Lonzo Ball signs with Chicago, which everyone figured that's what was going to happen. But then it just came out of nowhere. And the Bulls probably pulled off the greatest trade of all time in terms of assets we gave up. Only having to give up Tomas Sanarowski and Garrett Temple just to land Lonzo Ball. And then Lowry, I believe, wasn't too far after that.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, okay, if these were sign and trade deals, like how much of tampering, because there's multiple franchises involved in this stuff. So where are the Pelicans for their part in this? And where's Toronto for their part in this? Like,
yeah, it's not like it was a trade between Miami and Chicago, and these are the two facing punishment. It's I agree.
So they're punishing the teams that realistically gained something from these trades, which I think is kind of ridiculous because at the same time, Toronto didn't get a bad package back for Lowry. I mean, Precious Achua
and Goran Dragic.
Yeah, like that's not a bad. Actually, almost that's a pretty close trade. I mean, Lowry still provides a lot of value. But
when you talk about numbers physically, I mean, Goran Dragic has probably got similar numbers to Kyle Lowry. They just wanted something a little different.
And Precious has he looked, I thought at times really good last season and has potential to be a very good role player or better in this league at some point. So I don't really see why it's just Chicago and Miami that are suffering for this. But here's the way I'm going to look at it. We already fleeced the Pelicans in this trade that's basically probably going to get David Griffin fired before the season's up or at the end of it. So if the Chicago Bulls lose a first-round draft pick, all right, so then we traded a first-round draft pick and Temple and Satoransky, and I forget if we sent any other picks with the trade. It's been so long now. I'm just going to look at that like, oh, okay, it's more of a fair trade then. Like more of a realistic trade because we hardly gave up anything to land Lonzo Ball.
Yeah.
So, and if the $10 million max fine happens, all right, well, you know what, Reinsdorf family, I guess that's karma for sending all the money of the picks you sold and then probably threw it right back into the White Sox organization. Go Cubs.
Oh, man. Yeah, this is, I think at the end of the day, if there was, and let's be honest, there probably was early communication going on. I mean, I think there are with most free agency signings. I mean,
plenty of teams.
Well, the one that I don't know, most people probably don't remember this, but the one that really sticks out to me, I think it was 5 to 6 years ago when 2 seconds into free agency, Timofey Mozgov signed like a $50 million deal with the Lakers. And we're like, this is the first big deal, like Timofey Mozgov going to the Lakers. What was that? I think they're probably still paying him whatever sort of money.
Oh, yeah, that deal worked out really well.
Oh, yeah. No,
they're still paying the Wall Deng, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Lakers, yeah. All right. That was back in the Magic era. But
I think that was before Magic.
Was it?
Yeah, possible. I think Magic was only.
I don't even know who was before. Yeah.
I think that was
Magic brought in LeBron because he wanted credit for that. He got LeBron to the Lakers, but I think at the end of the day, this is what the league wants. They want competitive teams and they want teams going out there that are trying to make moves to get better. And we've talked about it and everybody else in the NBA has talked about it. The Heat and the Bulls were one of the two most active teams at trying to get better. And that's what the league wants. They don't want these guys out there trying to, just tank for draft picks and tank to try to be better 5 years into the future. They want aggressive teams because they want to sell tickets. They want to continue to see their ratings on TV go up. And I just hope the league doesn't overstep and try to just make an example of like, these are the rules that we set forward and you guys will pay this, like, let's take it easy. All right. You could probably dig deep enough into phone conversations and text messages for most signings and fines, whatever these findings are going to end up being whenever and if ever we hear what they actually are.
I have a fun conspiracy theory for both of these tampering punishments. Want to hear it?
Let's do it.
So Zion Williamson and Pelicans could be the face of the NBA someday. And the Pelicans, a struggling franchise that has always been trying to find its footing within its market, but basically the team is probably the most likely candidate to get moved to Seattle or Las Vegas or somewhere.
Yeah.
What if it's like the NBA is punishing the Chicago Bulls? Because obviously moving Lonzo Ball for the Pelicans made no sense for that team. So they're like, all right, you stole Lonzo away from the Pelicans. We're going to punish you for that. And then on the flip side, Miami, obviously Toronto's not getting any better, and they're losing their essentially their franchise player of all time in Kyle Lowry, which hurts the NBA's appeal to the international market because Canada is the only international team in the NBA. Fun little conspiracy. Maybe the Bulls are being punished for hurting the NBA stock.
It is possible, which it would be so hard to ever try to prove that. But no, I could see it where, I mean, but if I'm being honest, I'm not going to play devil's advocate, especially on the Pelican side. Zion's out of there the first chance that he gets.
Oh,
that's a discussion.
He's going to the Knicks or
that's
something.
A discussion for another day. But Zion already wants out of New Orleans. So
honestly, yeah, he would probably do well because it looks like he's been eating too much gumbo or something down there.
That's what they worried about in the beginning. But now it just seems like the man can't stay healthy, and it's crazy when he's out there. We saw he was doing things unprecedented. He was basically a 20-10, a night from he could play.
He can really play
without a doubt. But
I hope that situation gets rectified with his weight because the Mountain Dew commercials are a bad look. Yeah, I mean, look at Zach LaVine
sit next to Zach and
physical fitness, and then there's Zion, and Zion looks like he was actually drinking the Mountain Dew, which I have to say that commercial sucks. Because when they set the bottles back down, they're just as full as when they picked them up. It's like, come on, like you can okay, they don't have to drink it, but you could have poured it out a little bit
just before the next cut, oh my God. It's all right. If Mountain Dew needs some people to direct their next commercial, we're here. You can
the Team Up podcast. You can contact our agent.
Sure, we could figure it out. But, oh man, but yeah, that brings us to our last segment here, and our favorite segment is the Tee 'em Up segment. So Jared, who are you teeing up this week, man?
So mine's a little different from what you might expect. I'm teeing up COVID-19.
Okay,
I'm teeing up COVID-19.
Let's hear it.
COVID decimated the 76ers roster this past week, which is, I think, one of the reasons why they've been struggling as of late. Like you've seen several players, like Tobias Harris has been out for a while. I think
Joel Embiid.
Joel Embiid was a big scratch because of that. And even Matisse Thybulle, which I would have thought, okay, but Thybulle not playing, the Bulls have a chance, and still didn't matter anyway. But that whole roster was decimated by COVID-19. Come to this week, and you have Vucevic going under health and safety protocols too. And it just sucks that this disease, this virus that the world's been under for almost 2 years now is still having such an impact, and it's robbing the fans of seeing teams at full strength, and it's robbing the players of their health and safety. And I just hate how it's having a big impact on the game. I mean, it's kind of unavoidable with all these breakthrough cases. But it sucks. It sucks.
Definitely, and I agree with you. And I'm also really happy you didn't take my team up because I thought this was a good one, and I was worried that you thinking the same thing. But I'm gonna have to tee up the former 3-time All-Star Darren Williams.
Oh.
Darren Williams, the news came out a few days ago that he'll be fighting former NFL running back Frank Gore in a boxing match
Frank Gore
in the upcoming Jake Paul and Tommy Fury undercard. What world are we living in now that I never thought that'd be a sentence I'd ever say? Darren Williams and Frank Gore are going to fight, and, the headliners are Jake Paul and Tommy Fury. But that's the world that we're living in right now, man. I mean, I'm all for celebrity boxing matches. In most cases, I think as long as they're not taken too seriously and they focus on the entertainment aspect, they're mostly a good thing. But we've seen former professional athletes in the ring before, and it's never been pretty. It hasn't once.
Nate Robinson.
The next thing I had written down, do we even have to say Nate Robinson? We don't. It's ridiculous. Maybe Williams and Gore will put on a good show, but I just think this has tragedy written all over it. And I just hope Darren Williams, who I think he has maybe like a 6-inch advantage over Frank Gore. And I think they're about similar weight, or they were playing weight. I know Darren Williams has also been practicing MMA, and I think he owns an MMA gym since retiring from the NBA. But I don't know, man. It's just I don't want to see any of these guys get hurt. I know there's a lot of fans of Darren Williams back in his day, and there's obviously a lot of fans of Frank Gore over on the NFL side of things. But I don't know, man. This just has tragedy written all over for it. So I got to tee up Darren Williams, man.
So what are you teeing Darren Williams up for? Are you teeing him up because he's probably it's going to be like unnecessary roughness on Frank Gore, like he's going to destroy him? Is that what you're teeing him
I'm
up for?
teeing him up.
Because I think Williams probably going to win this handily.
I'm teeing him up because he's trying to, I guess you could say, right the tradition or right the pastime that we've seen of former professional athletes going into the boxing match. It has never once been a pretty show. And most of the times we've seen them, we go afterwards, we're like, they should not have done that. Or it was a money grab or any, I just don't want to see either of these two embarrassed, hurt, anything like that. And I got to tee up Darren Williams. I do think Darren Williams will probably win, but I also think it's not exactly a fair fight. I mean, the guy's half a foot taller than Frank Gore. And, he's been practicing MMA, which Frank Gore was playing in the NFL last year. So
I would say that's pretty fair. I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg with these celebrity boxing matches, especially when it comes to professional athletes. I mean, we've seen guys like Chad Johnson, Nate Robinson do this kind of stuff. And I think with fighting becoming so ingrained in American culture lately, like I didn't watch fights growing up. And then ever since like the last couple of years, I'm watching almost every major card now. And I really don't have a vested interest in fighting. So when you have now celebrities and well-known athletes and stuff, like this could go on for years because you're never going to run out of fan favorite celebrity athletes that are past their prime in their sport. So they're like, all right, let's just throw on some gloves. Like
one night to make a bunch of money and, people are going to watch it. I mean, I'll be watching it. I'm teeing them up, but I'll still be watching it,
would be a fun fight to watch.
What's that?
LeBron James versus Calvin Johnson. Like once
Ooh.
LeBron retires or something.
Similar in age, similar in size. I think LeBron's probably got a couple inches on him, but I think their playing weight would probably almost. Yeah, I mean, that'd be a tough one.
I don't know if LeBron would do it, but
no,
I'm going to speak it into existence. I'd like to see that fight.
Definitely. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the Tee 'em Up podcast. Be sure to let us know who you'd like to tee up this week down in our comments on all of our social media. Thank you for joining us. You can be sure to check us out on @TeeEmUp on all of our social media platforms. We'll be back next week as we continue to dive deeper into the NBA season. Check us out for content throughout the week and have a great day. And thanks for listening.
Make sure to share us with your friends and family.